Imperial army of columns of Mongol and Manchu horsemen streamed past the blocks of disciplined infantry armed with pikes, matchlock muskets, and swords. Burmese hunters peered from their hiding spots at the great Leviathan with growing horror, wondering how they could even stop their advance. Despite the dismaying looks of his men, Ming Kang ordered them to focus. They need to gather as much information on the invaders as they could. With what they have right now, engaging the Qing would only destroy the fighting chance that they have. Ming Kang knew that the only chance of victory was to understand their enemy. Then, and only then, can the Burmese stop being the hunted and become the hunter. After the Burmese field army had been destroyed at the Battle of Gotek Gorge, Ming gathered all his forces and blitzkrieged his way towards Ava, overrunning town after town and any defenses set up by the Burmese. He reached Singu in early 1768, just 50 kilometers north of Ava. Despite that 30,000 Qing soldiers were days away from the royal capital, King Simbushin famously did not panic and calmly ordered the defense of the city. With the large enemy army at their doorstep and no sight of any reinforcement, the royal court urged the king to leave. But Simbushin scornfully refused. He declared that he and his brother princes were the sons of Alampea, the founder of the new Burmese empire, and they would meet the Chinese at the gates alone if they had to. For all his fault, King Simbushin was no coward. Instead of defending the city, the king assembled his remaining forces and personally led them outside of Singu. Despite the severity of the situation, the Konbaung dynasty was forged through war, and the Burmese were determined to fight to the end. They dug ditches and sharpened stakes, expecting to see the dragon banners in the distance. However, the Chinese never came. It turns out Ming had overstretched himself. The closer the Qing got to the capital, the harder it became for the convoys to reach them. To protect them, Ming built outposts and garrisons along the routes, and while they kept the Burmese guerrilla attacks at bay, it made the advance much slower. The defeated Burmese forces of Mahati Hattura and Mahat Situ, realizing their inability to touch Ming army, pulled back to replenish their forces and reconsider their strategy. A deputy of Mahati Hattura, Ming Kang, had begun to note the vulnerability of these ever-expanding supply lines. He had been leading small groups of local hunters and cavalry patrols to track the Qing movements. Ming Kang proposed this to his commander, but Mahati Hattura was hesitant after the Burmese defeat at Gotek Gorge. To prove his point, Ming Kang took a small number of men and struck an isolated Qing outpost using their better knowledge of local terrain. After seeing the success, the Hattura gave him his full approval, and the Burmese operations shifted to attacking mobile convoys and isolated outposts while avoiding large contingent of Chinese troops and fortified supply depots. Ming Kang was given full authority over them. Burmese hunters and light cavalrymen made rapid attacks on Qing lines with crossbows and javelins, then retreat into the jungle when pursued. While they did little damage to the main Qing army, they slowed it down considerably. Ming Kang gained the nickname Danger, or in Burmese, striking from the clouds, for his swift guerrilla tactics. The Qing soon found themselves in a predicament. Ming knew that he had to defeat the Burmese before the tropical disease started to ravage them, just like it did during the second invasion. When the Burmese king's army arrived outside of Singu, it presented the Chinese a perfect target. They could kill or capture King Simbushin and avoid a grueling siege against the fortified capital. However, the Manchu commander knew that it also meant that he had to advance right into Burmese hands. Despite the victory at Gotek Gorge, they had very little reliable intelligence on the Konbaung forces, except that their main armies and elite forces were absent. Ming used his cavalry to probe the Burmese into attacking first, but Simbushin had been a tested battle commander in his youth and kept a tight rein on his men. Knowing that he was too deep in enemy territory, Ming focused on defensive tactics against Burmese guerrilla attacks. The war became a stalemate, with the Chinese being too strong to be defeated on the field, but also unable to advance further without risking their own superior position. As such, Ming waited for the second army to arrive and break the deadlock. However, it turns out the second army was still stuck in northern Burma. While Ming-Ri had been fighting his way towards Ava, the Northern Army was still being held off by Bala Minden and his men at Gauteng Fort against all odds. Knowing it was crucial to keep the Northern Army away as much as possible, Bala Minden and Nemil Situ made every attempt to keep them at the Gauteng-Bamo corridor. Bala Minden and the Gauteng garrison held the line while Nemil Situ harassed the Northern Army whenever they tried to leave, regardless of their own losses. The stalemate continued for the next few months as supplies began to dwindle for the Chinese armies and the burning summer began to set in. Worst of all for the Qing, the main Burmese armies were returning. By early March 1768, the battle-hardened troops of the Ayotian campaign were arriving. Boosted by these reinforcements, Mahathir and Nemil Situ took the field once more and started to directly attack the Chinese supply depots. After clearing the minor ones, they had turned to the main supply depot at Thaini. It was the climax of the third invasion, and it was a clash of titans. Ming-Ri had garrisoned the main supply depot with 5,000 of his best troops, but the recently arrived Burmese troops were the core regulars of the Royal Army, veterans from the brutal two-year war in Sino. Both forces were the elite of their armies and unwilling to back down. Grasslands of northern China and Mongolia were suffering from the heat of central Burma. Malaria and other tropical disease began to sweep in as well. Ming-Ri hoped that the Northern Army would still be able to reach him, but it was a false one. It turns out the Northern Army had overspent itself attacking Gauteng, and its commander, Earl retreated back into Yunnan against all orders, with his men dying from malaria, the heat, and lack of supplies, and the Burmese growing stronger every moment. Ming-Ri gave up all hope to advance towards Ava and began the retreat back into Yunnan with as many of his men as possible. The Burmese army of around 12,000 men began to pursue. Mahathir, for his successes, was made commander-in-chief for his achievements, replacing Mahasitu. Mahathir divided his army into two, a smaller one under Mahasitu, were to track the Qing forces, while Mahathir took the main force to attempt to position himself on the rear of the Qing. With supplies low, many Qing soldiers began to desert their positions in search of water and food. Learning the condition of the Imperial Army from these captured soldiers, the Burmese forces quickly moved to end the war in one single move. Despite all odds, Ming-Ri's generalship kept the army together as they limped back to Yunnan, withstanding Burmese attacks along the way. Mahasitu, seeking to redeem his failure at Gokigurt, positioned his forces in the path of the Chinese retreat near modern-day Pianunu to slow them down. Even in their weakened state, the Bannerman army was still a force to be reckoned with, and they easily repulsed Situ's attacks. Knowing that he had to slow them down by any means necessary, Sifu detached his light infantry and cavalry and used them to harass Qing cavalry patrols and foraging parties. In these skirmishes, the Burmese proved to be better. The Burmese armed with European flintlocks were able to get the better of the Qing musketeers. The Burmese cavalry, though less skilled, were more used to the climate and buildings, whereas Chinese Mongol infantry riders were weak and had disease and defeat. The Burmese were only able to do limited damage to the Qing army in these skirmishes, frustrated Dinghi's retreat. Unfortunately for Sifu, the narrow passage and the column formation of the Qing army meant that they would not be able to encircle the small forces. He was able to bottle them. Still, the Chinese had overwhelming numbers and Sifu was forced to give ground swing. Just as Dinghi's army would steamroll over Sifu's forces, Burmese troops suddenly burst up from the jungle and attacked the Qing forces from its flanks. Falling back from the front and attack from its flanks, the Veneman forces tried to pull back to the field so they could reorganize. Managed to maintain order and fight their way out of the heavy melee. But the rest of the expedition was left trapped as Burmese soldiers swarmed over the last disciplined troops and cut down their officers. Panic swept through the Qing ranks, knowing that their kingdom had nearly fallen to these invaders. The Burmese were in no mood for mercy and began to massacre them. Thousands of Chinese soldiers fled into the jungle to die from disease or local fauna. Those that remained were put to the sword. The slaughter was such that the Burmese soldiers could hardly grip their swords, their hilts so slippery with enemy blood. With only 2,500 prisoners and less than 5,000 men escaping, the entire Vandaman army had been effectively wiped out. Henry had been severely wounded in battle. He could have escaped with those units that had maintained order, but the Manchu commander was only concerned with his failure. He had been the most successful of the invasions. There was no election. He cut off his queue to be sent to the emperor as a token of his loyalty. He then rode to a tree and hung himself. Between the disease, the jungle, and the constant harassment by the Burmese, only a few dozen units of the main imperial army returned to India. It had been the greatest military achievement in the modern history of Myanmar, and Mahathir was widely credited for snatching victory from defeat by both Burmese and foreign sources. British historians dubbed the final clash as the Battle of Mayhill after the colonial town they founded. It has since become a military case study of infantry fighting against a numerically superior foe. Mahathir was honored by King